Okay. So, as I was stating before, we'd have a case assignment that we would do off off campus between the group. And I would like you to look at April 7th, week 13, case steel tools. This will be similar to the work that you will be doing with the cases inside the book. So your assignment will be a group assignment. It will be due next week. It will be a turn in, and we will talk about it while we're in the class. I want you to read this case. It is listed online. I would like you to create a SWOT analysis in your group. I would like you to define a goal or goals for steel and 3+ objectives for steel tools using this. So read the case through. This will be practice for your case assignments. For the remainder of the semester, this will be the 2 days in which you will do the class presentations. It will be on the 24th and the 29th. We have 4 groups here. So I would like your groups, if you have not already done so, to request one of the cases that is inside the book. First come, first served. Your presentation will be 30 minutes long. We will go over the format on Thursday. You will present situation analysis. You will do a situation analysis, a SWOT analysis, and you will do goals and objectives, and also define the core competency of each of the organizations that you're preparing the case on. So the steel tools is actually a little bit almost a level up from the cases that you're going to do inside the book, but I think this one's noteworthy. It's a very good case. Define what the situations are, define the core competency inside of steels, because that is ultimately going to be the guideline for how you define a goal or goals for steel. And then the objectives, remember, which are specific, quantified, and time-based.
The steel cases do
Next Tuesday. I would like it to be a turn-in assignment. Make it as many words as you wish. Brevity is the soul of wit. So write substantial so that you have I have a clear understanding of what you're working with. But I've read War and Peace, God knows how, so I don't need to read a lot. So sufficient.
Is that with the groups that we're already assigned with?
Yes, the groups that you're already assigned with, so you'll practice this one together, and this will prepare you for the case assignment, which will come on the 29th and the 30th, 24th and the 29th. So the last 2 days of the semester will be the groups presenting their cases. The presentation will be slideshow. You only have to turn in the slides. You do not need to create War and Peace again, okay? So before we go on, we're going to do a little fun thing. All right. So tell me the brands that this alphabet represents. So what's the first one? I kind of think that was Alka-Seltzer. I'm not sure. Anybody got a better idea? The B, yeah, Bubblicious,
Oh,
that
that
one's
one.
right, yes. So what's the C?
Cool.
Yeah, the D. The E. There you go, yes. F. Fritos, you bet. G. Yep. H. I get stuck on that one too. I. This is my generation. It's icy, you know. Used to go to the convenience store and get an icy. Big in the South, believe me. J. Jello. Jello. K. Hmm, Cool Whip. L. Lysol. M. Yeah, well, that was the easy one. N. O. Oreo. Yeah. Yes. R. Yes. S. Yes. I go blank on T two. U. V. W. X. Y. York peppermint patty, and Z. That's soap. What is got the name. Anyway, what I'm trying to show and to represent is many of these are 40 or 50 years old. We don't even have to see the whole name. We just simply identify it by the first letter because the font and the way that it's built is memorable and it's meaningful. And that is the power of a brand. A brand is a heuristic. It is an identifying characteristic which solidifies in our own mind what exactly this particular item represents. Good brands last forever. Bad brands go away. So this is a really bad representation here, and it's very, very hazy, and I'm sorry this way, but this is the overall brand universe. And so if you look at the brand universes, and of course it's difficult to see, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 individual corporations represent over 2,000 brands. And each one of those has a unique market position that is identifiable and memorable and represents a core group who not only represent that or understand it, they not only prefer it, but many of them insist it. And we will go or take no other position than to have those brands or nothing at all. Okay. Yeah, screen share. Yep, that's right. It has closed. So, without further ado, let us talk about branding and positioning. So, at its very, very basics, what is a brand? A brand is a name, letters, or numbers that can be spoken and expressed. They are memorable, unique, and identifiable, and separate particular identifying brands from another. A brand mark is a symbol or figures of a design that make it unique in the known universe between corporation. What's the corporate symbol for that? Maybe you'll drive one. Mercedes. Anybody want to guess what this one is? Right. The symbol basically has to do with the four corporations that were merged together to create Audi. This was basically part of a strategy, and the strategy is selecting the right combination of names, symbols, terms, or designs that identify the product unique in the consumer's mind. This one you may not know, but it is unique in the history of marketing. Exxon, which was the name of Esso and a couple of other corporations. It's a petroleum corporation. What makes Exxon unique, it is the first brand identifier that was designed and selected by a computer. It actually came out in 1970, which gives you an idea of how far ahead this was, but it was designed basically as multiple different kinds of combinations of Esso and two or three other corporations I forgot that they merged with. So how they come about, whether it is through a long permutation or design, whether it is done by the computer, all of those are basic ways in which we try to create this identifier and this factor for differentiating a product from its competition. If I were to say Walmart and I were to say Target, they both sell many times the same thing, and yet they're so unique and so separate that there's no way we would confuse one from the other. This is where branding strategy comes in. Even though you will probably find exactly the same goods in the same locations, the design on the store and the way that they're run are entirely different. This is a very kind of busy slide, so we're not going to worry about that, but we're going to start talking about what are some of the issues or strategies that when we use branding. Now, many of us will understand product branding, and product branding is exactly what it sounds like. It's the branding for each unique individual product that a company sells. But all branding starts at the very top, which is corporate branding. And many times it is considered as important as product related because it does two things. One is that it aims at more than just the consumers of the product itself. It aims at all those individual stakeholders who have some skin in the game when it comes to that particular company. Good corporate brands build and enhance the firm's reputation. They stand for something unique and identifiable, and it will retain the firm's reputation when something unfavorable comes along. In 1992, John Sculley was about to leave as the CEO of Apple. He had been there for 4 years. Steve Jobs had left. He wanted to find a way to leave Apple so that he would stamp his mark off and I think go on to Pepsi. I can't remember which company. Anyway, he used the Apple Newton product, and the Newton was known as what's called a PDA. So PDA is the precursor to the smartphone. It was called the Personal Digital Assistant. It was an electronic device similar to the size of a smartphone in which you could take notes, have a calendar, all of those things, but did not have an internet or network connection at the time. It was released early. And the signature and the handwriting recognition software was very, very scanty. So much so that it was made a joke. And unfortunately, Apple at that time really came under severe crisis, almost to the point of bankruptcy, when Steve Jobs decided to come back and help rebuild the reputation. Steve Jobs was one thing, but the reputation of Apple was so powerful and so reliable that they were able to come even this. And so good corporate brands can help you survive even the worst of disasters. So what are some of the advantages of a good brand? Well, identify those unique products that are separate from each other. Once again, I can identify Walmart and Target as completely different, even though I know exactly that they have the same things. They allow me to also compare values between products as well. I know when I have a Samsung product that I understand its characteristics, and I certainly understand Apple's. They help speed the process. A good brand is a heuristic. I know that if I get this particular product, it's going to be identifiable and important. Good brands can even be a lifesaver. In IBM in the 80s had a slogan or a brand mantra that said, no one ever got fired buying IBM. It was a brilliant strategy. It worked great. And it was once again a heuristic so that they knew exactly which one is the right, and that's where risk reduction comes in. It reduces the risk of an unknown product and a concern that you may not be buying the quality that you have or expect. It means also that you can release a product that may be unique or different, but the product is readily accepted because it sits under a brand that is considered high quality. It is no coincidence that all of your laptops flip with the logo straight up so that you can see it. There's a purpose behind that, and that has to go with the enhanced self-image. That's also why, by the way, you put stickers all on your laptops as well. It is an enhanced image that grows. And then you also have a certain amount of product loyalty with it as well. I have no idea why Apple earbuds were worth $200, but apparently they were. And remember this, the price of anything is whatever the traffic will bear, and that's how much they were valued. Scroll, please. Come on. There we go. So these are some of the basic branding decisions that you make. We're going to go through these and we'll talk about these further. Whether or not you go with a manufacturer's brand versus private label, individual versus family branding, and we'll talk about licensing and co-branding as well. All of these are decisions that are made ultimately to decide whether or not or how we wish to brand our products. So the first thing that we can think of if we're running a corporation is whether to settle on our own brand or whether or not we should create our own brands themselves. So a private label brand is owned by the merchants that sell them. If I were to go on a Walmart, I would find Sam's Choice on many things. The things at Sam's Choice also I want you to think about are items that are prepackaged and have a relatively long shelf life. That's done for a reason. It makes it easy for you to quite simply buy a generic product like Walmart can, slap your own label on it, and sell it as if it's your own. If you go into a Walmart and you look at Sam's Choice, depending on who was the canner or the bottler, you might actually see on the can itself, packaged by Del Monte. Now, why would Del Monte become their own competitor? Well, it's relatively simple. I can go to Walmart and sell 500,000 cans at a substantially reduced rate, or I can stack 500,000 cans on the shelf and hope consumers buy them. the advantages of private label brands in a supermarket where the margins for packaged goods like that is 2%. A private label brand, the margins can be up to 40%. That's why you do this. And that is also why Aldi has some substantial discounts when it comes to their particular goods, because I think it's 85% of the things on their shelves are private label. And I've tried their $2 chuck, which is their $3 bottle of wine. And I forced it down and it wasn't bad. But quite simply, the reason they do that is the vast margins that they have, which allows them to make substantial claims for standard prices and substantially discount them and still make more than the regulars. So individual versus family branding is when two of them, individual branding is when a firm gives each one of its offerings an entirely different name as if they're unconnected to each other. Procter & Gamble, in their laundry detergents, own Gain, Cheer, oh gosh, I'm going by Tide, Downy, Clorox, and 3 or 4 other brands. But without knowing that Procter & Gamble actually made them, you wouldn't know that at all. They do that because each one of their target markets or each one of the market segmentations represents something completely different. Gain was actually the Gen X's brand that they kind of broke away from their parents, where their parents were using, the boomers like myself were using Tide. But each one of those had its own unique segment, and each one was happy with those things. Gain was also unique because it was the very first laundry detergent that was liquid. One of the things in the 60s and the 70s is that laundry detergent was solid. And I can remember it coming in gigantic boxes like this big. Around the 60s and 70s, one of the things, by the way, that they used inside of laundry detergent to make it work was they put phosphates in it. So to clean laundry, learning something new, it takes heat, or it generally requires that because soap is an emulsifier and heat helps the whole catalytic conversion thing happen. Well, the problem with phosphates is it's phosphorus, and somebody in the 60s decided maybe it's not a good idea to be dumping phosphorus into our water table. So at that point, the whole formulas had to change. Well, around the 70s, Procter & Gamble was deciding, well, maybe we can go to a liquid detergent. But once again, we're talking about perceptions, just like Miller Lite was. So the perception of beer or light beer was low-calorie beer, basically not for men. Well, the same problem with laundry detergent being liquid was liquid detergent was for something entirely different, which was for washing dishes. And so they had to change that perception. The way they did it in the late 70s was they sent out 40 million 2-wash bottles of Gain along with every newspaper in the United States, and literally flipped the script overnight to where everything is liquid detergent now. So amazing. Family branding is where you use the same name or part of the brand name on every single product. Campbell's soup. There's no question that Campbell's soup is driven, the 150 varieties of Campbell's soups were actually driven by 2 particular soups entirely. You know which, those 2 soups that drove all the others? Tomato?
Chicken noodle.
That's it, exactly. And all of the other varieties were driven by the fact that we looked at chicken soup, especially when we were sick, and tomato soup as a wholesome meal, especially with our children and with grilled cheese. So we're going to go through some of these in a minute, but they give these as kind of, fillers in. But also just remember, the manufacturer, the name brands, they cost less. They go along with the image, and there's a certain built-in loyalty with those particular items. The private label brand, number one reason, profit. That's really the big reason. Instead of making 2%, it's 35%, sometimes even higher. We talked a little bit about this before. Co-branding is when you have two brands, generally within the same corporation, that are similar to each other, so that their characteristics lend themselves to be used in cooperation, using two or more brands on one particular product. And so what happens is you leverage the image and the reputation of the brands to create something really distinct. This also goes a little further when you're talking about ingredient branding. And when ingredient branding is that when there's multiple brands that can be found in a single common item. And so the Lunchables is a classic example. In the Lunchables, you will find Hormel, you'll find Kraft, you will find Ritz, and you'll find the the drink, I forgot. Anyway, that's what ingredient branding is. I do not have any idea what took Taco Bell so darn long to come up with Tostitos and with the nachos. It never made any sense why they never thought of that, okay? But that's a classic example of a successful co-branding. Now, I've seen Jeep and I have seen Harley Davidson advertised together, and I don't get it. It may achieve some kind of synergy, I guess, but brands have to have some kind of similarities that are consistent with each other, not two completely different types of transportation. But brand alliances can be very valuable and can be extremely successful, but usually for short runs. But ultimately, why you don't have long runs is that ultimately what can happen is they can erode the brand integrity on both of them. So I'm J.K. Rowling. I just came out with these books that seem to be doing really well. And the next thing that happens is that with any good fan group is they want action figures. So J.K. Rowling is not a manufacturer. She doesn't know how to make them, how to market them. And so how does she maximize her profit off of those? Is brand licensing. So brand licensing is where one firm permits another firm to use its brand, generally on non-competing products. As a matter of fact, usually it's complementary. It invokes or involves a licensing fee. The example is Mattel has all rights to be able to create action figures based upon the Harry Potter series. But of course, it has to do with final rights with the author, giving them permission to create the product. And usually with brand licensing is you'll find what's called a sundown date, which means that at the end of a given specific period, all rights revert back to the original author or the originator. Except if it's Spider-Man, and it's going to stick with Sony forever. which probably is a good thing. I'd like to see Tobey Maguire one more time. So anyway, brand licensing. Brand licensing especially is appealing when you have substantial differences in the ability to use it. And quite simply, there's not a level of expertise to be able to exploit it. And so, how do we value a brand? There's multiple ways that we value it. And we'll talk about brand loyalty, equity, and how they go into designing a product that has appeal. Loyalty is a positive attitude towards the brand that results in a customer consistently choosing that brand over other competing products. And though generally loyalty is thought of as yes or no, there's actually levels of it. So brand recognition is the acknowledgement that you know that the brand exists, and that is generally your first choice. Brand preference, however, is where you want a particular brand to the exclusion of other available alternatives, even to the exclusion of where those alternatives deliver perhaps an objectively superior value. Brand insistence is where you simply refuse to accept any alternative other than the brand itself, and you will go out of your way to obtain that particular item. In brand insistence, the other brands simply don't exist in your universe. If you have to travel to get it, you will. And it doesn't matter the distance that you have to travel or the time that it takes or the monetary cost of being able to do that. And it's actually on a wider range of products that you might think. So the first thing is brand loyalty. How much do consumers value it? Because ultimately, that's the choice. And ultimately, it leads to the next thing that's called brand equity. How much is the brand worth? And the way that they calculate that is, given the material pieces in that particular Microsoft and the total cost of the goods sold to make that particular piece of equipment, what is the gross margin above cost that consumers are willing to buy? That's what equity is. In the calculations of brand equity that you generally see, brand equity is if I were going to buy only the brand itself and nothing of the capital equipment, what is the total value of that particular brand? So let's answer that question right now. So every year, there are multiple publications that come out with what they consider to be the most valuable brands. And so in the brand universe, this one in particular, you can start to see the cluster in the very beginning. Now, NVIDIA right now is the same brand equity as Microsoft. And that has happened within the last 3 months. Why is NVIDIA so valuable? Does anybody want to tell me why?
Chips, right, for AI research.
That's it, exactly. The AI chips for NVIDIA, they have been developing over the last decade and have reached that magic spot, that fruition in which their chips are used for artificial intelligence. And that has shot this brand value up by a factor of 5 in the last 3 months. Microsoft is the same. Apple is close to that. Now, this is also generally their value brands. I've seen others in there in the mix that have greater value. Let's see if I can find the Forbes one. That's visual. Here's the one. Forbes is usually my favorite to go to. So if we were to look at what you might expect a normal list to be, Apple's at the top. If you notice, their values are different. There's so many different ways that you can value brand equity. To me, it's just the selling of the name regardless. A lot of these are surprises and kind of interesting, some of them. But it basically states how much the value of the brand is, even if you were to move all of the capital in it. And so, along with the brand itself, there is that rolling advertisement that goes wherever the brand exists, and that is the package. Packages exist for 2 to 3 reasons. One of is to protect the products. The second is that packages help in instruction in its use. But even more so, it is a heuristic that identifies the brand, especially if the brand is a peripheral good. In other words, use peripheral sightings in order to make your determination as to whether to purchase the item or not. If we see a Coke bottle, we know it's a Coke bottle from a mile away. It has a unique, distinct shape. Has anyone ever had a chunky and even know what that is? Okay, so a chunky, what is a chunky?
A chocolate bar, and I think it has raisins.
Yeah, exactly. And it's literally a square, okay? Just by its shape, you know what a chunky is, okay? If I were to look at the packaging, and as I've said before, if I saw a candy that says orange, we're looking at either a Reese cup or something else, but we know it's just by that symbol. Three Musketeers suffered for years, quite simply, because Three Musketeers had a dark label that was close enough kind of to a Snickers that it got confused. If you look at the Three Musketeers now in the convenience aisle, it's silver colored, it's aluminum shape. They changed that quite simply to help it to identify. That's the value of what packaging is. We can also use it in a co-branding strategy as to make the shapes similar enough so that our first natural reaction is to reach for a particular brand without necessarily knowing exactly what the brand is. Now, there's also a danger in this as well, because generic brands are those items. There are many items on the shelf that are just close enough to the name brand that if you're not looking close enough, you might actually grab them. And so, oh gosh, what's the name of the store group? Oh gosh, IGA, Independent Grocers of America, has their own generic Coke, and it actually is the same almost red color, and it's called a Bubba. That's it. And if you weren't careful, it looks close enough without going over, and that's what saves it, you know, some very serious lawsuits. And so packaging is a way to identify unique characteristics. And then also, if you're a close substitute, you get close enough without going over the line. So labeling is this very same thing. It's a discussion basically of how to use the product, how to make product selections off it, whether or not you need to have multiple items in order to fulfill it. All of those come from the packaging and labeling. It is a unique identifier as the brand itself. And so while we're talking about what makes products unique and different, it is now time to talk about differentiation in the way things look, in the way things appear. So we talked about this a little bit on Thursday, and now it's kind of talking about it again. And it is, what are the differences in the size, the shapes, the offerings that make it unique and separate from other products? So much so that our products appeal to a point where we will take that and nothing else. We do not want our products to be like other products. It pushes too close to the biggest danger that we have in the modern world when it comes to selling, which is commoditization. It is not the similarities that appeal to our items, it is the differences that make it appealing. So we talked about developing unique market segments. We talked about defining and deciding which are the target markets that appeals to us based upon our company's intellectual and physical assets. The last step is, how do we appeal to the consumer's mental image of our good relative to the competition? And this is the concept of positioning. What makes an Apple different from any of the other laptops? If you look at the laptops, kind of look the same, don't they? They all have the same kind of things. You've got USB connections in them. One's a Lenovo, one's a ThinkPad, one's a Microsoft. Is that an Asus? What you got?
Legion.
Oh man, cool. You know you have one? That's a nice size. Okay, so what we got? Dell, got an Apple, Lenovo. Now, the kind of unique thing about them is, does anyone have a USB on their machines? You have HDMI's on them? Okay, we all do. You got RAM memory in them? Yeah. You run an operating system? Yeah. So what's the difference? Okay. Well, there's a couple of things that are important about laptops that must be similar in order to be in the same group. If I'm looking at a laptop, I have particular categories of things that I expect in order for me to first buy that particular laptop. There's the expectation of a good screen, a fairly decent sound system, running an operating system I can understand. There is the expectation of particular items that without it, I don't consider it to be a laptop. This is what's known as category membership. I can have different machines running different items, different operating systems, but there are what I consider to be identifying characteristics that every item must have before I can first consider purchasing those given items. Those are what are known as points of parity. In every cell phone, no matter what the brand, there will be a consideration that there are points of parity that no matter what brand there is, I expect them to have it. I expect a camera phone. I expect Wi-Fi. I expect a cellular connection. I hopefully have a different screen or the same screen. Those are what are considered points of parity and category membership that we expect to have. Now, this is a Samsung. This one has a stylus that works very much like a mouse. Rarely use it, but it allows me to draw, do some other things with it. which are kind of unique. And that's what I expect with this particular Samsung. This is what's called a point of difference. And so with each item, there's the expectation that there are points of parity, but the points of parity are not what sells this particular Samsung, it's the point of differences. The differentiating figures that the target markets consider valuable, which separates it from the competition. Now, the funny thing is that Samsung was basically my second choice. So I was an LG fan for years. LG from 2008 to 2012 was the largest seller of consumer electronics in the world. And it all started basically from their high-def televisions. So when LG, and I think I've said this before, was about to start coming out with their high-def televisions, they were looking for suppliers and settled on one, which was Walmart, and it was an excellent choice, and that's why they led for years. However, somewhere around 2014, 2016, they decided to get out of the cell phone business entirely and kind of bummed me out. I've used an Apple, I've used the iPhones. They didn't appeal to me. Let's just say the characteristics to me were too over-enveloping. I tend to be kind of a tech weenie in ways. I like to be able to plug in SD cards to be able to move things back and forth. And yeah, I could probably do it under Apple, but just didn't appeal to me the way that it was done. So this item came along as second choice. I've gotten to enjoy it, and now I'm seriously looking at the Fold 6 or Fold 7 now, but I won't do that until the summertime. Anyway, the differences are what make it appeal to me, not the similarities. The similarities bring me to that particular product category to buy. It's the differences that help me choose which one to buy. So I'm a big fan of Lenovo and ThinkPads. I've had them myself. Lenovo actually originally came from IBM. You're working on the original laptops that basically at one point ruled the world. And they're still pretty darn good. I like, does your fold back?
Yeah.
Okay, mine does too. It allows you to use it as a tablet, although it's a pretty big tablet, but that's what I like about it. The Lenovo I had, they took it away from me, the jerks. Anyway, we get like a new laptop every 5 years. I don't want mine replaced, but I could fold it over. The keyboard folds into itself so that when you're using it in that tablet phase, it doesn't matter how many times you touch the keys. It's just pretty cool. I consider that to be unique and different enough that I want that. Do you have a stylus too?
No, I don't
Okay.
think I've ever used the tablet mode, to be honest.
Well, that's all right. Well, no, that's no worries. I mean, they pay for my stuff, so I don't care how much they spend, okay? The university. It's crazy what they spend. Anyway. So differentiation is the uniqueness, and the positioning is to create that image, this differences that appeal to consumers. So the relative position, where does the position come from? It comes only from the competition. As I've said before, we love our competition because our competition is what makes us different, not what makes us the same. When you read the Steel Tools case, you're going to find some things that are in the appendix that help you understand what makes their particular tools different. And one of them is the strategy canvas. Both of these are visual aids. As what was it, Dr. Alford used to say, pictures are good, but many times pictures help us to see differences in ways that words simply can't. And so the first one is what's known as a perceptual map. So a perceptual map is a standard XY coordinate that isn't X or isn't Y. It's just simply quadrants in which we would use 4 different words to be able to explain a particular appeal of a given item. So how does this actually work? So if we were to do research, and we're doing research to what consumers prefer in a given particular item, we would use what's called a semantic differential. So a semantic differential is a question that you use in research that allows us to determine where consumers look at a given item, such as a BMW, and decide where it is on a particular line. And so what you have is you would have this particular words, expensive and distinctive, on a scale line. Okay, we're going to take out one of those. Most scale lines will have like an odd number so that you can find an yes or a no or an either or somewhere in the middle. Sometimes in marketing research, you take out the odd line or the midpoint and you force consumers to make a choice. It doesn't actually mean that these particular items are unidirectional. In other words, they are similar in characteristics. But what it does do is it forces consumer, even if the words don't match, to try to determine which ones it's more like. And so one consumer will come along and say, well, it's more expensive and distinctive. And another will say, well, it's distinctive and expensive, but it's kind of more like that. And what it does is it builds characteristics and helps us determine where it is on this particular line. Somewhere down the line, they'll have another question, which are not necessarily on the same line, but basically represents 2 different attitudes. And then they'll be asked, where does that particular item fall for it? Well, it's more sporty than conservative. That's a little bit closer to each other, you could almost say. So what you ultimately do is you plot this place, and ultimately what it says is that BMW is here. It is considered, oh, excuse me, affordable and practical. I'm sorry. I gotta read this stuff. Expensive, distinctive here, and then affordable, practical here. My bad. Okay, so ultimately, once it plots out, then we find its position. Now, danger occurs on a perceptual map when 2 items are close together. When 2 items are close together, it can be considered that consumers consider them too close together, too similar. Now, the amazing thing about Honda and Toyota is that they're very close together, but consumers consider them very distinctive, and it's one of the characteristics that you can't see on the perceptual map. Honda is considered the engineering standard of automobiles. It is one of those unique ones in which the consumer is thought about, but they think more about the car and its engineering than they do the consumer. Toyota is in the very same product, but Toyota considers the consumer more than they consider the product, and it's only marginal. But sporty and affordable practical is a very valued place. that place is where profits can be driven, and two corporations like Toyota and Honda can be so close together. My Highlander was developed, this is kind of the way they think of it. So my middle panel on my Highlander, the box was built so it was deep enough you could put an iPad in it, a 12-inch would safely. That's exactly how they designed it. That takes a lot of thought. I mean, that's considering the consumer to a pretty deep level. And so that's kind of what makes Toyota different. Now, interestingly enough, you know, Buick, Dodge, Ford are kind of close together. Chevy kind of pushes over, but it's not surprising that Toyota, Honda, and even Scion are in the same location. So what's this purpose, or what is the strategy that you would use? Well, if there are two corporations that are too close together, like we see here, but one of the particular corporations might prefer with their products is to try to push it out to where they're considered more sporty, to increase the sportiness here. Lincoln, Cadillac, and Mercedes have a difficulty. Back when this particular item was drawn, they're very close together. What Cadillac has done in the last 8 to 10 years is Cadillac has tried to push itself in this direction, okay? Why? Because realize this is not positive and negative poles, but what you're looking for is a location in here where nobody is, and in marketing research, we call that the sweet spot, okay? The sweet spot is a location where a particular brand or product is not there yet. If I were Chrysler and I were looking for a way out, with Chrysler, I would have pushed them towards sporty, but I would definitely not try to be expensive because that's a bad area to be. So this is a perceptual map, and this is how marketers would use this particular item. Finally, the strategy canvas is the next visual representation that helps us as well, because once again, it's not where the close or not where they cross together the same, it is their distinctiveness that is considered important. The other thing about this is that it helps us to determine where they're high, or let's just say broader, and where they're lower. And what it helps us to do is try to find a differentiation between those two given corporations. And so if I were to look at the value here, and I were looking at Amazon, and I were looking at Barnes and Noble, and trying to come up with some way of making myself distinct from Amazon, these are the two things that I would shoot for in my marketing plan. One of is that Barnes and Noble has a place to sit and read. And the other is that the book selection in a Barnes and Noble at this point is actually higher than the one at Amazon. I think if I am looking for advantages, those are the ones I'm looking for. These are the ones I'm hoping to exploit. And this is how you use the strategy canvas. It isn't necessarily that this is better or this is better than this. Where am I different? And where I'm different is where consumers can look at me as being unique and distinctive, and that's where I should plan my position. All right, that is a good place to stop. We'll come back on Thursday and we'll start back again on this. I hope you all have a great day and enjoy our spring weather. Cover up before you freeze.